Now, I understand that you spent 15 years in the RCMP,
That's correct.
and tell us briefly your career in the RCMP.
I joined the RCMP in August of 2006. I graduated from the Depot Training Academy, January 2007. I was posted to Whitehorse, Yukon as a general duty constable for roughly 4 years. In December 2010, I transferred to Mayo, Yukon, a smaller, more remote community 4 hours north of Whitehorse. I was posted there for roughly 2.5 years. And then I transferred to Ottawa, where for the remainder of my career, I was a full-time sniper observer on the National Division Emergency Response Team.
You resigned from the RCMP in December 2021?
That's correct.
And why did you do that?
I spoke out publicly against the federal government vaccination mandate for COVID-19 vaccines. And after speaking out publicly, my security clearance was revoked. And I knew that I would be subject to disciplinary action. And after I reviewed what my options were in regards to that, I discovered that if I was terminated for misconduct, which I suspected would be the case, I could potentially lose roughly half of my pension transfer value. So I made the decision to resign out of fear that I would not be able to set my family up adequately financially in the future.
Thank you. And beyond that, have the COVID-19 public health measures affected you or your family?
Yes, sir, very much.
Can you say briefly why?
Well, the obvious beginning is that I felt it necessary to leave my 15-year career, which I was provided 15 dedicated years of service to the mounted police. I was not a complainer. I worked hard. I was passionate about my craft. I think I had a reputation of being a hardworking professional. Then beyond that, my wife and I were no longer permitted access to public spaces that we as tax-paying Canadians were helping fund. And that prevented us from being involved in our children's activities, such as minor hockey, which we were both heavily involved in for a number of years, roughly 6 years. We couldn't travel to see our family in northern Alberta, which, living in the second largest landmass country in the world was problematic. So it's roughly 40 hours of drive time. And we lost neighbors and friends who were perfectly fine to have relationships with us until the vaccine passport deadline kicked in. And then we were no longer worthy to speak to. And beyond that, there was a very heightened state of anxiety about how much further the situation in Canada would degenerate. And what I mean by that is that the dehumanization effort had begun. And that was I believe that was in August of 2021, when the Prime Minister had initially announced the impending federal vaccination mandate, and then he was campaigning into September for his snap election. And he was making comments regarding.
Okay, sir, we only have an hour, so
Okay.
I think the commissioner understands what you're saying.
The ultimate problem was that The Canadian population was led to believe that people like myself and my family were a threat to other people and their children, which was not true, by his own admission in July of 2021 on camera.
So this week in the inquiry started off with slowly finishing his testimony from the previous week. This week began the cross-examination. And Chief Slowly did what you would expect Chief Slowly to do and talk about the city of Ottawa and his time with the police force. Chief Slowly has a background as an athlete. Obviously going to play for the home team and promote the home team. An interesting twist with Slowly's testimony was that he agreed with, I think it was Superintendent Carrick from the OPP, that the convoy was an organized threat and a national security threat, as they believe, for example, the protests in Windsor and Ottawa, they believe were directly related and connected. After Chief Slowly, we had testimony from Chris Barber, Steve Chaudelet, who is leader of the Farfadas, and Bridget Belton. The following day, we had Keith Wilson, who was the lawyer for the... And after Keith Wilson, we had Tom Marazzo, ex-veteran, and Pat King, who's a controversial figure in himself. The following day, we had a financial presentation from the commission talking about how the financials worked, from the cryptocurrencies all the way through to the Give, Send, Go, GoFundMe, and through the SWIFT banking system and how the funds worked, where the funds went. And it was saying, I think that there's $6 million are sitting in escrow, but the rest has been refunded. After the financial presentation, BJ Dichter. After BJ Dichter came James Bowder, who was the author of the MOU. After Bowder came Tamara Leach. Tamara Leach's testimony, she was being examined by the commission the following day. She was cross-examined. After Tamara Leach was Chris Deering and Maggie Hope Braun, who were victims of police brutality. Chris Deering himself is a vet, and a pretty heart-wrenching story.
That's a wounded veteran! Yes, that's a wounded warrior right there!
I'm asking you that this never happens again. You have the power of a whole country behind your opinion. Please use it to protect the Canadian people from this kind of misbehavior from this government towards its people ever again. The overreach for me was just too much. And again, I had to be in Ottawa. It was my duty. I had no choice.
Peace and love. We will win this.
Bring the pain so that the world can see what true love is.
That's right.
Just about 100 feet from the memorial is where the police started to line up. And that's when the call out went, and all the veterans, or there was about 20 or so of us, we lined right up, we linked arms, and the consensus was that we're going to stay there and try and protect the Canadian people.
And why did you want to do that?
It was our duty. When I joined the military, I swore on an oath to protect people. I went to a war zone to protect those people, and I never thought that someday I would have to do it on Canadian soil, but I did, and I will again. I would.
Very real concern with respect to the witness panel of Chris Deering and Maggie is to not allow that evidence to be heard.
Emily Tamman for
I take it you're supporting the proposal that or the objection?
That's right. Yes, we agree. Just on behalf of the Ottawa Coalition of Residents and Businesses, we share the view conveyed by the Ottawa Police. But in this case, we would agree that there is prejudice and that the evidence, at least as it pertains to the arrests, should not be admitted.
It's Chris Diana for the OPP. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, the OPP agrees with the position of our friend, Mr. Michikowski, both the main position or the alternative position. At this point, we don't know if the OPP was involved or not in these incidents.
Following them was Jeremy McKenzie, who brought up Diagolon, and it's hard to watch that man in jail. It's pretty rough. But he did great. He was very forthright, very honest, described everything in detail. Him and his lawyer killed it. And ended off the week with former sniper for Trudeau, Danny Bulford. And Danny, not only did he talk about the security intel that he had, talked a little bit about what they would normally do in Ottawa in terms of their security, where they would have snipers in general, how they would deal with crowd control, and I thought Danny did a great job. So some key themes that were brought up throughout the week. One of the key themes they brought up was this MOU, this Memorandum of Understanding.
And you became aware of his, or Canada Unity's Memorandum of Understanding?
Yeah, very early on, I was approached by many people, both within the client group and others, asking me about it.
And I believe, is it fair to say it was, in your, from your perception, getting a lot of attention, and you talked to a lot of people about it?
Yeah, they would ask me. I didn't make it a topic that I felt I needed to discuss with others, but I did get asked it a lot. And what the first thing that's obvious about it is a memorandum of understanding, in its simplest legal concept, requires all parties to it to sign. And it was evident that the signature lines on the last page were not going to be signed by the Governor General, nor someone from the Senate. And in any event, I would explain, when I was asked by the board to brief them on it, I explained, and I apologize for my voice, I'm recovering from a cold.
There's water there.
Yeah, thank you. That I explained that there's only two ways that governments change under our parliamentary system. The first is when the Prime Minister contacts the Governor General and dissolves Parliament and asks that the writ be dropped. The second, through parliamentary tradition, is where a bill is identified as a confidence vote and Parliament votes to defeat the bill. In that second instance, the Prime Minister would similarly contact the Governor General. This idea that a certain number of people could sign a document and that would somehow compel or incentivize and lead to a change in government, I explained consistently and repeatedly, is legal nonsense.
At any point did you become aware of the Memorandum of Understanding, which I'm sure you've heard about over the last few weeks, or the last few days at least?
Yes, sir. I did hear of the Memorandum of Understanding. I learned about it once it was submitted already to, I believe, the Governor General. I think the media had a copy, and I had read it. Again, I'm no lawyer, but I know it wasn't written by a lawyer. It wasn't very well written. And I remember having a conversation once I learned about the MOU with somebody that I believed to be involved in drafting the MOU. And it was a private one-on-one meeting. And I said, you must retract that. If you do not retract that or pull it back or put the genie back in the bottle, we are going to denounce it. It made us look like we were here for a completely different purpose than what we were there for. It really muddied the waters. And I don't know if as a result of that conversation, they pulled it back. I just know that the next day it was sort of retracted.
When you say it made it look like you were there for a completely different purpose, what was that purpose?
Well, I had read it, and as far as I was concerned, it was, we were there for the mandates. That MOU was there for a different purpose. And I don't remember the details of it, to be honest. I skimmed through it. It was not very well written. And so I didn't think it was credible. I didn't think it was appropriate. And I certainly didn't think that the government was ever going to suddenly resign because somebody sent them a memo.
You may not remember the details, but was your concern that what the MOU appeared to call for was something that was undemocratic?
What I believed when I read it was that they thought that it was a legal process, that they believed it was a mechanism of government that they were trying to initiate. Even though I'm no constitutional scholar by any means, but I could tell that it was not going to go anywhere.
In the video from January 13th, 2022, which I've already referenced, Mr. Bowder presented a document that he referred to as a Memorandum of Understanding. Do you recall that?
Yes.
Were you aware of the Memorandum of Understanding before January 13th, 2022?
No.
Sorry, and just for the sake of the transcriptions, just if you could wait till I'm finished my question before I answer, just clean a transcript. So were you aware of that memorandum?
No, I was not.
Okay. What do you recall Mr. Bowder saying about the Memorandum of Understanding?
I reviewed the video just a couple days ago, and I remembered again. I believe he just explained how the document worked and that it had already been sent to the Governor General and to the government, I believe.
Do you recall if at that time, and when I say at that time, I mean January 13th, if you had an understanding then what Mr. Bowder was hoping to do with his Memorandum of Understanding?
I believe I ignored it. I don't know. I wasn't into that sort of thing.
and again, we expect to hear from Mr. Bowder, and we'll hear his evidence on it. The Commission understands that one of the things that the Memorandum of Understanding presented was a notion that in respect of the COVID-19 mandates, that Mr. Bowder believed that there was not enough time for lawsuits to challenge those mandates, and that in fact through a piece of law called the Helsinki Act, that a group of a citizens committee could come to an agreement with the Senate, and any mandates they viewed as unlawful would stop. Is that your understanding of ultimately what the Memorandum of Understanding meant?
Which nobody read.
Not to my knowledge. To this day, I still have yet to read the Memorandum of Understanding. I have no clue what's in the document, and I will never read it.
I have gone back through my emails. Somebody had asked me to sign it, his MOU, basically gave me a rundown of what it was, and I went over and I signed it just as support. I've never read the full document.
At any point in time, did you become aware of the Memorandum of Understanding?
I did. I think it was quite a few days after that, and I do recall hearing about it. I've never read it. I really didn't pay any attention to it, to tell you the truth.
The mandates and the impact on all the convoy organizers' lives.
Could you just perhaps provide some more context or an explanation about how it was the case that you received a phone, like what drove you to go to Ottawa after receiving a phone call from a man that you'd never met before, who you didn't know anything about, that would have you leave, your wife and your kids to go to Ottawa? What drove you to do that?
To be perfectly honest, I think it was a case of fear. I had, over the time of COVID, noticed things that I never before believed that I would see in Canada related to the way the police and bylaw and the government were going after Canadians. And for the first time in my life, I was, actually afraid of police. And I have several friends that are police officers. And I had a phone call with Randy Hillier one day, and Randy didn't know who I was. This was, I sent an email to him and Roman Baber and other people, and months later, his office had returned the call. And Randy doesn't even recall the conversation. And they said, I spent 25 years of my life in the military, and for the first time, I'm actually afraid in my own country. And he said, never be afraid. Like, you can't be afraid of the police or the government. They're here to serve us. And I think for me, that kind of flipped a switch, where I was like, I went from thinking, I'm afraid to get arrested or beaten by the police or getting an $880 fine to, you know what, now I want the fine. I'm done. I'm not going to hide from these people anymore. And so that started to mentally transition the way I thought. And then we came to a point where I thought, well, at some point, the lawyers are going to step in and intervene and start protecting the public. And they didn't, except for a few. Then when the vaccine came out, I thought, well, the medical community is going to stand up and put a stop to this because of informed consent. And they didn't, except for a few. And it was the truckers that gave me an opportunity to actually get into, fighting for my kids' rights.
Their thoughts on honking?
I now ask you about the horn honking. The Commission has heard evidence, and I'm sure you're aware that at different times in the protest there was a lot of horn honking. I assume you'll agree with me about that.
Yes.
Did you consider the horn honking to be a form of peaceful protest?
I consider the horn honking to be a form of excitement more than peaceful protest. I'll be the first to admit the horns annoyed me. I did everything in my power to try and get the horns to stop. I've put out multiple videos on a regular basis saying stop, especially after the court order came in on, I believe, whatever day that was, the 7th.
So let's pause there for a moment. The horns bothered you, and prior to the court order, which was an injunction to stop the horn honking, what steps did you take to limit the horns prior to the court order? Speaking
to the drivers, it was getting everyone orientated, trying to get them situated in a place where they were safe and their needs could be met, I guess. Seeing as our entry was so messed up, I'll use the words. It was organized chaos, unorganized chaos. There was trucks everywhere. There was vehicles everywhere. The only thing I could do was put my videos out stating, we're not here to disrupt residents of Ottawa. They didn't ask for this. It was the federal government is why we came, and we did what we could. So I'm going to show you a video and then a post from your Facebook. So we'll start with the video. This is HRF 192. And again, this is one of your TikToks. Okay.
They've already filed a $4 million civil lawsuit against us for horns. You guys shut up over there? Am I doing my part?
Who is Pat King?
Now, your counsel has indicated that you have been charged with criminal offenses, and I understand that a condition of your bail is that you are not allowed to use social media. Is that correct?
I'm not allowed to do anything. I've had absolutely every right of a Canadian citizen stripped of me. My freedom of speech, my freedom of protest, my freedom of everything.
Am I correct? You can't use social media?
No, you are absolutely correct.
Thank you. And so I'd like to, I understand you had a large following on social media. Is that correct?
Can you define large?
Well, how big was your following?
It was big.
Can you define big?
It was international. It was big.
Do you recall how you were introduced to Mr. King?
I don't, sorry.
When you first came to understand that Mr. King was promoting the convoy, what did you come to learn about him?
Just another helping hand, another person with a large following that would help.
Did you come to learn anything about his background prior to January 2022?
Not until probably 2 days into the convoy itself.
And the next night, you were part of a Facebook Live streamed event that Mr. King hosted?
Yes, sir.
The next person I want to ask you about is Mr. King. If I understand correctly, you became aware of Mr. King during the United Re-Roll because you would see him posting and then you stopped following him at the end of that. Is that correct?
That's correct, yes.
And I apologize if I did ask you this, but had you met Mr. King prior to the Freedom Convoy?
No.
When did you first meet Mr. King?
I was thinking about this last night. I must have met him while we were on our way to Ottawa, but the first time I remember now meeting him was in Winnipeg when we were discussing Benjamin's concerns with the video that he'd seen that morning about bullets flying. I'm sure I met him along the way before then, but I honestly don't recall. But that was definitely, I remember that conversation, being on the side of the road.
Okay. And again, I think we'll get to that in a minute. What would you understand Mr. King's role to be in the convoy prior to that conversation?
I believe he was helping with some logistics. He was, I think because of his previous experience with United Re-Roll, he had a pretty good idea as to the routes that they would be taking. So fuel, helping to try and find fuel, that type of thing.
Do you think Mr. King was participating for the right reasons?
I believe he is a passionate Canadian.
So is that a yes?
Yes.
It says here that we have to control his rhetoric. At that point in time, did you think you stood a shot at controlling Mr. King's rhetoric?
Well, he's kind of a beast, and he very much speaks his mind. I, again, was just concerned with, to be frank, he was a bit of a hothead, in my opinion. And I was just concerned that he would say things or say controversial things or inflammatory things. And so that's why I added in we can't even be threatening to throw snowballs at Parliament, because that's not what we're here for, right? So.
With respect to Mr. King, you understood people didn't want to deal with him because some of his comments online about bullets and so forth were distasteful. Is that right?
Yeah, that was the sense I got, but I knew somebody had also told me those comments were for 2 years prior to the convoy, and it was just a complete hit piece by somebody whoever put that video out there, that it was just meant to discredit him and make us look bad. And it was a video.
King was discrediting himself by saying the Prime Minister was going to catch a bullet?
From the testimony I saw here in the room the other day, the context of that had something to do with something completely unrelated to this convoy.
What about his online comments about race and the Anglo-Saxon race? Are those kinds of comments discrediting the movement?
I know nothing of those comments.
Or Mr. Barber, his online racist comments, was that discrediting the movement?
I believe he owned up to that himself yesterday.
Right.
You talking about the slow rolls at the airport?
Yes, sir. Okay. Yeah.
And why did you think you needed to send someone to keep Pat King well behaved?
Because I only knew Pat through reputation in one or two interactions with him, and I didn't want there to be any confusion as to what they were there to do. It was to really just do a slow roll and to guarantee that in no way did we stop at the airport, because we were well aware that there was an orange helicopter route for the hospital, and we wanted to make sure that we had no impact on any air ambulance ability to get in and out of that airport. We had no intention of slowing down or disrupting the airport, and I wanted to make sure that we had somebody that was going to guarantee that we weren't there to close down or lock down the airport or disrupt the air ambulance. We just wanted to basically send a message that we can still move around the city.
So I take it, so one of your concerns was potentially that Mr. King might try to shut down the airport or blockade the airport?
It was just on my part, to be honest, and some of the others that we discussed, it was just a precaution, just to make sure. We also believed that if we told him not to do something like that, he would listen. I don't.
So you take a precaution when you're concerned that something might happen. So is that what you were concerned would happen?
Yes.
Okay. And was your concern based on Mr. King's reputation, as you indicated?
Yes, just solely on his reputation. That was it.
And what was Mr. King's reputation?
A little bit of a wild card. I remember in a meeting once that I had jokingly referred to him as a hand grenade going off in a room and scaring everybody else that it was going to explode. and it was a bit of a joke. He laughed. Everybody else seemed to think it was funny, but it was kind of like funny because, yeah, that's true. But just reputation-wise, he was a little bit of a wild card, and I just wanted to make sure that we were able to contain anything like that.
Were you concerned it was possible that Mr. King may not engage in peaceful protest?
That was never a concern that I shared or had.
What was the deal with the mayor and deal with the police?
Is that location where your convoy stayed for the?
That's where the map sent us. That's where the police sent us, and that's where we went.
I was going to ask you, did you have ongoing contact with the OPP or the Ottawa Police Service along the way?
I honestly can't tell you if I did or did not. I'm sure I did. I had a lot of phone calls coming in and a lot of police talking with me along the way. Once Sarnia met up with the GTA, Dave Steinberg took over lead as he had the most vehicles. So I'm sure he can answer those questions. And we did communicate between myself, Mike, Andrew, the Yonkers, ADT Trucking. We were all in communication. We all knew each other. At this point, we had approximately 3 weeks to 2.5 weeks to prepare. So we were definitely constantly in communication.
Your understanding, though, is that there was contact with the police along the way?
My understanding is yes.
And did they? Is it your understanding that they directed you where to go when you arrived, as you've described?
My pictures show that where the police officer is moving the barrels and my truck is going through where he directed.
So, so you would have supported a deal if there had in fact been a deal to move the trucks to different locations, you would have supported that kind of a deal?
Absolutely. If we could have lessened the events to the citizens, absolutely. We weren't there to disrupt the citizens. We were there to have our government finally hear us after 2 years. I did my due diligence, sir. I wrote 32 letters. I went the right way, and no one listened to me. So I don't know what you expect of me, but bringing my truck, well, I brought my pickup truck. I didn't bring a big truck. Did they notice me? Did somebody finally try and come and talk to me? The answer to that is still no. So what do I need to do to have my government that is elected to talk to me, to help me solve my problems? You had horn honking. I watched people get thrown to the ground. I watched children in parks getting thrown off their skateboards by police officers. No one helped those people. Matter of fact, people were supporting this kind of behavior. This is not the behavior of a free country.
So in your view, the people of downtown Ottawa were unfortunate casualties. If the Prime Minister had listened to you, what happened to them, those 3 weeks of sleeplessness and so forth, that wouldn't have happened. It's the Prime Minister's fault?
I feel for them. I honestly do. But I feel for those truck drivers that were about to not be able to feed their families. Many of those drivers had their whole families in those vehicles with no income. They lose their home. Kids are raised in a truck until school age. We had a 1-month-old baby that the city of Ottawa took fuel from, and we had to find accommodation so it didn't freeze to death. Which is more inconvenient? Not having fuel and watch your child freeze to death, or listening to a few horns? I'm sorry that your clients feel that they are entitled to $460 million for horn honking. Who was going to replace my income if I took a vaccine that killed me so my husband could survive? Not any one of your clients, I guarantee you.
But you inflicted that on my clients.
And your clients supported vaccine mandates.
You're well over your time.
It starts at the top, February 12th, from you.
It's in reverse chronological order. So
Yes.
that would be the latest response. I had prepared following the board meeting on the Friday evening where the board decided to approve the deal. They were all there in person except for Mr. Dichter, who was incapacitated due to his broken leg and had to stay at the Sheridan, but we had him joined by conference call. And because of the significance of this, even though on the Friday they had all agreed to proceed with the deal with the mayor, I wanted to get something documented. So I sent an email to all of the board. You can see where it says, right just by where the mouse is, a little bit up and to the left, a GIDG. That's a part of Bridget Belton's email address. You'll also see, you can see Mr. Dichter's emails on this as well. It's the first one on the CC line, actually. And I received responses from everyone approving it. It makes reference to the arrangement with the mayor. The plan was, how are we going to get the truckers on side? So the decision was made to do this Freedom Manifest document where Tamara, with all the board members signing at the bottom, would say it's time. We've had an impact. It's time to do something differently. It's time for us to focus our presence on Wellington, where our beef is with the federal government, for them, and for them to have the other trucks move out to the other locations.
Right. And if you can just scroll up, please. There, stop right there. You say in that email from February 12th, 3:47, you indicate that the drafting committee had looked into a way to draft a document that would describe the Freedom Convoy's overall demands of all governments and a way forward strategy. And so they were working on the broader document for review by the board tomorrow, but you're circulating a draft now as a it was intended to be a communication for the captains and truckers regarding the deal with the mayor. And then you say towards the end of that line after Wellington and Elgin, while at the same time taking away the excuse that Trudeau wants to unleash the police goons and seize trucks. Remember, we are trying to block Trudeau from having the justification to cause the police to use the new emergency powers against the truckers and allow the truckers to stay here in Ottawa for as long as it takes, etc. Now, this is February 12th. At that point in time, did you anticipate use of the emergency sign?
Yes.
Of what happened in terms of the movement of the trucks outside from the residential area, either to leave or up to Wellington, correct?
Yeah, well, I was directly involved, and on the Monday, and my text messages and my phone logs confirm it. My text messages with the Sergeant Lee, with the Mayor's Chief of Staff, and with the City Manager. The reports I was getting from the ground were that the police were not in a position. They were getting blocked at different phases by the police. They finally got some trucks moved. We were ready to move trucks again on the Tuesday. Chris had worked, and others, Joe Jantz and Ryan and Dale and others had gone out and worked hard to get a whole bunch of trucks ready to move on the Tuesday. Police completely blocked it. We now see all the back communications and infighting that was going on. We didn't know that at the time, obviously. And then again on the Wednesday. And the other thing is we realized when we discussed it, and I listened to the road captains and to the Chris Barbers, is they felt that once the big trucks moved, there would be stragglers, but they wouldn't want to be alone, and that they would either leave or they may go in and fill a little bit. But so we recognized that. And there was also discussion that if, and this is controversial, but there was also discussion that if we get down to a few areas where everybody else has either gone up to Wellington or gone out to the base camps or gone home, and we have a few holdouts, that Freedom Corp would no longer provide any supplies, fuel, or materials to those areas to incentivize them to follow the lead of everyone else who was leaving downtown.
A letter that you sent to Chief Bell stating your view on the powers that were the police were given under the Emergency Act.
Mm-hmm.
And you took issue with whether there was the power to prevent peaceful protesters from coming into Ottawa to protest.
Correct. And just to clarify, the letter is signed by Ms. Chipiuk, but I did review the letter, and we also had at least 4 or 5 other lawyers from the Justice Center reviewing the same statutory regulatory instruments, and we had all reached the same conclusion that the description that the government officials and the police were using to describe the measures was not even close to what the emergency proclamation actually said, and that as long as you were not seeking to interfere with international trade, disrupt or interfere with critical infrastructure, or engage in serious acts of violence against persons, you continue to have the right of political advocacy, protest, and dissent. And so the labeling by the police chief and others that any Canadian citizen was no longer allowed to walk in downtown Ottawa or hold a sign in front of their parliament was not legally accurate and was against the charter.
And I think we've seen the video that's, and you don't have to bring it up, HRF 50274 that you did with Mr. Barber to essentially giving that opinion and telling whoever saw the video that they could and should come to Ottawa and continue lawful protest.
We were in the 7th floor boardroom at the Sheridan. I just finished briefing the board on the legal review that had been completed of the proclamations. And Mr. Barber turned to me and said, come over here, sit on the arm of the chair, let's do a TikTok. And it literally happened that quick.
And in making that TikTok video, was it your understanding that there was about to be an enforcement initiative by the police to remove people from the red zone?
I didn't know for sure. What I did know is that there was numerous times where information would come into the operations center from various police sources that a raid was imminent, and it happened many times. And then the raids either did occur in part, such as Coventry, or other evenings where they would go and take firewood and fuel or food from one of the blocks. But it did appear from the buildup we were seeing on the ground, it was obvious in the information we had about the number of, I don't know, there's some Lansdowne Park or someplace had been set up as a processing center. So it seemed that there was a shift occurring.
The CCLA lawyers only ask questions regarding the bank account.
I'm going to be asking you questions via Zoom. My name is Eva Krajewska, and I'm counsel to the Canadian Civil Liberties Association.
Pleased to meet you.
My questions are going to focus on the impact of the orders freezing the bank accounts. So I understand from your earlier evidence that your bank accounts were frozen during the course of or after the protest. Is that fair?
Yes, they were.
And can you just please specify for me, was it your personal account that was frozen?
So I've got 3 major accounts that were frozen. One was the corporate account. The other one was a joint bank account with my lovely wife. And the third was Toronto Dominion personal bank account. The personal bank account with Toronto Dominion was closed for roughly 3.5 months. I had no access to funds. The other 2 bank accounts were, they were closed for the weekend. A couple payments went back. I had one NSF charge, I believe, and the fuel cards got shut off for my drivers, so they weren't very happy.
Perfect. My name is Eva Krajewska, and I'm counsel to the Canadian Civil Liberties Association. And I just have a few questions with respect to the freezing of your bank accounts. I know you already spoke about this in the examination conducted by Commission Counsel. And I understand from that evidence that you learned from a phone call you received from RBC that your bank accounts were frozen on February 17th?
That's correct, but it wasn't from RBC. It was actually from a police officer.
Okay, I see. So the telephone call that you received on that day was from a police officer that your bank accounts were frozen?
Yes, when I called it at a later date, it's a police officer.
And do you know whether that police officer was a police officer with the Ottawa Police Service, the RCMP, or the OPP?
I believe he was Toronto Service or from the Toronto area.
Okay. And the police officer told you that your bank accounts could be unfrozen once you informed them that you left Ottawa. Is that fair?
That's what he stated.
And did you check at the time that your bank accounts had in fact been frozen?
I was already informed prior to his call by my husband.
So your husband called you to let you know that he was not able to access your joint bank accounts?
His business account, which had my name on it to pay for expenses, his and my joint household expense account, as well as my personal bank accounts, were all frozen. He informed me at approximately 8 a.m., could be sooner than that, and I got the call at 10:04 by the person claiming to be from the Royal Bank.
So they claimed to be from the Royal Bank, but you believe that they were a police officer? Am I getting that right?
Now I believe they were a police officer because I called the number afterwards. A
You
few
called the
months
number
later,
afterwards?
not directly, a few months later.
I was just going to say that luckily we had cash in the house because my son's heart medication, we couldn't purchase it. My account had been frozen. And if we didn't have cash, he wouldn't have been able to get his heart medication. He had a month and a half previous had myocarditis and was on some pretty intense heart medication.
And were you given any information, either from the bank or from the police, as to how your bank accounts could be reopened?
I was never notified that my bank accounts had been frozen, and I was never notified that they would be, and I was never notified that they were reinstated at no time.
So did you just find out that they were frozen because you could no longer use your cards?
Could no longer access any of our financial assets at all.
And how did you find out that your bank accounts and assets were unfrozen? Was it just because you were able to use them again?
We just continued it. Once we discovered it, we would check every couple hours to see if we had access to our own money.
Were you able to access your online banking?
Just to get in, you could log in, but there was a message on it that said access to your financial whatever was denied.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Marazzo. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner.
It was a deal with Rideau and Sussex, and it was not the Farfadas who were subject of the wrong.
What happened at Rideau and Sussex that led up to your finding out that there was a willing, or at least Ms. Chipiuk and Mr. Marazzo, the bottom paragraph, finding out that the truckers had agreed to move their vehicles to Wellington, but there was a problem in removing the Jersey barriers, and that fell through.
Correct. Well, and it was not, what had happened was, my briefing is that we had an advantage because the first three big trucks that would have to move were the ones that had the Polish immigrants. And Ms. Chipiuk is Polish background and can speak Polish fluently, and she very quickly developed a rapport with these truckers. And we knew if we could get the first three to go, it would incentivize the other ones to join in. There was a sense of each of these areas that people didn't want to be left alone, that there was a real group think going, we picked up. So, but this was an intense group. There's no doubt about it. I mean, you've heard about that. There was this Farfada stuff that the first time I heard it was in this inquiry, so it was never on our radar. But so Mr. Marazzo gathered about 80 of them together in the middle of the intersection, surrounded by their vehicles, and got them to pick amongst themselves two representatives. Then he moved forward in effectively a parley in the old military sense with the police to the west up to closer to Wellington. And then the particular police liaison, Sergeant Feng Li, had a little bit of an aggressive personality. He could really turn aggressive very quickly. And Mr. Marazzo was concerned about him interacting directly with the trucker leaders from that intersection. So Tom went up, spoke to Feng and said, okay, bring in the equipment. We're ready to move at least half the intersection, the westbound, up into that space on Wellington. Feng, Mr. Lee's phone rang. He stepped back and then turned around and said to Tom, the deal's off. They're not going to move the barricades. And we now know from the record and the testimony of others that others higher up the command vetoed that movement. Okay. So Tom, but this is important, Tom did not go back and disclose what actually happened. He said they just can't get the barriers moved because he didn't want to destroy what little progress we had made. We agreed to have a cooling off because a lot of the truckers were upset. They had arrangements to make kinds of moves before our involvement, and they felt that the police had double-crossed them. And so we decided to give everything a cooling off and to try again on the Thursday.
And so that was on February 8th. And I take it that February 9th, there were some discussions with the OPS PLT officers, and that led to February 10th, where you returned to Rideau and Sussex to try again. Is that
yeah, on the 9th, PLTs, so 4:40 p.m., contacted me through Eva Chipiuk. That was the protocol we had, is that if they needed to get me urgently, they would call her because she was always at my side. And they came over to a meeting in the main floor of the Sheraton. It was an intense meeting. But we briefed the board that evening, and Tamara Leach requested that all of the road captains, all legal, the board members all assemble at Rideau and Sussex the next morning, prior to 10 a.m. in an all-out effort to use their persuasive skills. We had an initial success where there was a load safe truck that you'll see in lots of pictures. Load safe is what was on the logo on the side of the cargo trailer of the semi-truck, and it was parked right by the valet area of the Chateau Laurier, and it was pulled up on an angle, almost jackknife, blocking almost 4 lanes, and the police did not like it at all. They'd been trying to move it, and I was standing with a large group of PLTs, Miss Leach and others. Mr. Barber came up. We said, hey, I said, Chris, or one of us said to Chris, is there any way you could go talk to that guy? And as you heard, we all watched in amazement. Chris jumped up on the step and was hanging onto the mirror. The window came down. He started visiting with the guy for a few minutes, and all of a sudden, Chris hollered out for truckers to come and set up a perimeter to safely back him up, and the backup alarm went on, and they repositioned him, so he was right up against the curb, and I remember we all thought, okay, this is a good sign. Maybe we're going to do this.
And then, as you say in your statement, there was a crowd that suddenly appeared who didn't understand what was going on, and they, in effect, kind of surrounded the area.
Just a little bit more detail, because I think it's important for context.
If I can just stop you for 1 second, I do have a video. Would that help?
I'd like to contextualize it first, if I could.
Sure.
So what happened was we had a bunch of failed attempts to get enough truckers to agree. We always had the Polish guys at the front that were ready to go. So a lot of the team, or those of us who were there to try and clear that intersection, were done. It was a very, very cold day. I was back and forth trying to keep warm in the lobby of the Chateau Laurier. That's when I got served with one of the seizure orders and was dealing with the TD Bank on interpleader. There was so many things going on all the time. In any event, we'd largely given up. It was just about to get dark. And then one of the PLTs came out of the area, and he came up, and Tamara was with me and a couple of others and said, they're ready to go. And Tamara's like, well, then let's do it. So they called in the big heavy lift equipment to lift the barricade, and they end up bringing a tow truck, as well, a flatbed tow truck, because you may have saw one of those pictures. They have these orange mechanical devices that are actually bolted to the ground, and the vehicle drives over and it comes up behind it. So we were waiting. It was now getting dark, and as was typical, as you get into 4, 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock, the number of Ottawa residents and others that would start to converge in the downtown would significantly increase each night. This was typical of that. When the trucks and the heavy equipment arrive, they've got yellow flashing lights, they have backup alarms. That caused even more people to come. Because we were anticipating moving the trucks up past the War Memorial to Wellington, we needed, the police were obviously handling this part of it, more police to create a safety corridor so that no one got run over. And as the one vehicle backed up and its alarm was very loud, people started to rush in. Tamara had been removing from the barricades the signs. No one out. The police were smart not to go and start taking signs down. It was Tamara. She was recognized. So she would place the signs over on another railing by the Senate to get the barricades ready to be removed safely without controversy, hopefully. Just as the equipment was going, people rushed behind the tow truck because they seemed to think that the police were about to do something bad to the truckers. I was talking to them. Tamara was individually talking to groups of people. It's okay. This is a cooperative move. We're trying to clear this intersection. The truckers want to move up to Wellington. And then people would sit on a barricade. Tamara would go talk to them. They'd apologize, get off the barricade. She'd turn around, and different people were on another barricade. And then the police were further in. Tamara and I were trying to talk to as many people as we could to explain that it was okay. This is a cooperative move. We're just trying to clear an intersection. And then the people just swarmed in, and that's where the video plays.
Okay. Can you pull up, please, HRF 401587?
And I'm in the orange high visibility coat, which they jokingly called my trucker camo.
We stand on guard for thee.
So you went on Maisonneuve up to MacDonald-Cartier, and the RCMP took you south on MacDonald-Cartier till close to Parliament. We have a video available. We're not going to listen to it because it's an hour long, but it shows that several vehicles and trailers went through the Bay Market, and on Rideau Street they turned left to Parliament. Is that the way they went? Well, listen, if I recall correctly, we stopped on Rideau. That's the only thing I could change in what you said. We had to stop on Rideau because we had trucks against truck and we couldn't go any further. Do you recall where you stopped on Rideau? Well, I don't live in Ottawa, so I don't recall exactly. Was it close to a shopping center? Could you see the Parliament? No. And Chateau Laurier? No. During public hearings, various services in Ottawa and Gatineau testified that Farfada members were at the intersection of Rideau and Sussex. Does that ring a bell? No. Farfalla is a group of people which expanded greatly in Ottawa and Gatineau. We don't know everyone. We talk about thousands of people, thousands of Quebecers and Ontarians joined the movement. So I haven't got all the details. We truly concentrated on what went on in the parking lot and to help out as much as we could to offer parking place for those who wanted to have a parking lot and then walk on to Parliament to show what they thought.
Obviously, the subject of Jeremy McKenzie.
Did you ever interact with Jeremy McKenzie while you were in Ottawa?
I did not know.
Did you know who Mr. McKenzie was during the protests?
I became aware of Mr. McKenzie during the protest. Just know that he was a veteran, and we did a lot of work with the veterans when we were here. Although I never seen Jeremy that I know of. I met a lot of people but I don't recall meeting him or seeing him, or I've never spoke with him too.
Any re-examination?
Yes, Commissioner, just one area. Mr. Marazzo, you were asked a few questions with respect to Mr. Jeremy McKenzie.
Yes, sir.
Did you know of Mr. McKenzie prior to coming to Ottawa?
Just from what I saw on his social media short videos, that's all.
Had you ever met him prior to coming to Ottawa?
No.
Were you aware that he was also a former Canadian Forces member?
Yes, I was, which was one of the reasons why I followed him.
Did you know that Mr. McKenzie was in Ottawa at certain times during the protests?
I did.
Did you ever interact with Mr. McKenzie in Ottawa?
Not physically. I phoned him on 2 occasions, and I had a couple of text messages with him back and forth.
Do you still have those text messages?
I don't believe I do. I'm on a different phone, and they were just basically hi, it's Tom. I want to have a phone call with you. I've had 2 phone calls with him during the time that I was in Ottawa.
And you described, I think, one of the phone calls. What was discussed on the other one?
The first one was, I actually, now that I think about it, somebody that I knew had Jeremy's contact info, and they reached out and said, I just wanted to meet him. Because to be honest, at the time, I was just a fan of what he was doing on his podcast. I knew there was a veteran in town, and I kind of wanted to get his thoughts. We had a conversation, reminisced about both being posted to CFB Petawawa. But then later on, the next phone call was when I saw the video of him laughing about what was going on in Parliament regarding Diagolon. I just called him and I said, tell me everything there is to know about Diagolon, because we may get asked about it, and I'm just curious.
Who gave you Mr. McKenzie's phone number?
I honestly don't know. That is somebody that I probably met when I first got to Ottawa, and I did not know any single person. I never met even James Botter until I stepped into the conference or into the lobby of the ARC, and he brought me into the conference room. So I don't even know who gave me his phone number.
How did you know the person might have Mr. McKenzie's phone number?
It's a good question. I can't. The only thing I can remember, it was a female that gave me the phone number, and I can't remember how they came to have his number.
Did you ever have any communications or contact with anyone who was protesting or was in Coutts, Alberta, while you were in Ottawa?
In Coutts, no, I had no communication with anyone in Coutts.
Did you have any communication with anyone at any of the other protest locations in Canada?
There was one message that somehow came through either text or email from somebody that was in Windsor, and I don't know who this person was. I know they were in Windsor, and my only reaction was, whatever you do, make sure you keep at least one lane open across that bridge so that there can be traffic going back and forth.
Do you still have a copy of that message?
I don't believe I do. And because I don't even know who the person was, I don't. And to be honest, I really did not want to have contact with any other protest around the country. I had my hands full with what I was doing. And all of these convoys and protests were all organic. They started all naturally on their own from citizens that were absolutely fed up with what was happening to this society in this country. So I was perfectly happy to have no contact with any other protest other than the one I was involved in.
During your 2 conversations with Mr. McKenzie, did he ever indicate to you that he was in contact with anyone in any of the other protest locations in Canada?
No, sir.
Thank you. Those are my questions.
Before I start, there are some people I'd like to acknowledge in the room. And I'd like Jeremy McKenzie to stand up for a moment.
Stop it there. Sir, how do you know Mr. McKenzie?
He does, he has a podcast, and he does a lot of political satire and comedy. He does some serious videos sometimes.
And Diagolon.
Were you familiar with the group Diagolon during the protests?
Yes.
What did you?
Well, not during the protest. Afterwards, my knowledge of Diagolon, it's a meme. It was something that Jeremy made up to online troll.
Have you spoken with Mr. McKenzie since the protest?
I have not.
And then finally, Diagolon, you said that this was a joke, and it was about creating a diagonal state of people who don't wear masks. Isn't it, in fact, the case, it was the concept or the image is a diagonal state where there would only be white people who would live in it, and they could get all non-white people out, correct?
All right, so...
Just wait a moment, please. Let's try and keep it quiet, please, while we hear the evidence. This is the equivalent of a court in the sense that we have sworn evidence, and we'd like to keep proper atmosphere. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
If you were to meet some of Jeremy McKenzie's friends and the ones that were on the video that I was describing earlier, where they were laughing about the Liberal Party using Diagolon as a justification, you'll see clearly that one of Jeremy's best friends is a black man. I can't even comprehend how somebody.
Does he have a Jewish accountant as well?
Sorry?
Does he have a Jewish accountant as well?
I
Sir,
don't even know what that
have
means.
you looked at Mr. McKenzie's online rants? You've seen them. Do you think that
I've seen some of his rants, and some of them, some of the things he says I don't agree with, and some of the things I think he's absolutely spot on. But that's up to me to make a decision on whether or not I find that the content is appropriate or not. And I have seen Jeremy say things I don't like, and I've seen Jeremy say things that I thought were brilliant.
Thank you.
He is the creator of a fictitious meme on the internet known as Diagolon, which I assume what you're going to ask me about. And the vice president of Diagolon being a time-traveling, cocaine-addicted goat. That is just a internet meme that has no meaning at all. And I had spoken to Jeremy the first time when I was in Ottawa on the phone. And the second time I spoke to Jeremy was when the Liberal government was debating whether or not they should use the Emergency Act, and they were citing this fictitious goat that time travels as a domestic terrorist group in justification for invoking the Emergency Act. And I saw a video that Jeremy and his friends were doing, and they were laughing hysterically, showing clips of the government actually talking about Diagolon as being a real thing. Everybody knew it was a joke. When I saw the video, I contacted Jeremy and I said, tell me everything there is to know about Diagolon. He said, if you draw a diagonal line from Alaska through Alberta to Texas, it makes a diagonal line. And that's why it's called Diagolon. They're the only states and provinces that don't have mask mandates. And he used it as a joke. He made the symbol for Diagolon in a second on his cell phone because it's a joke. And it is meaningless. He did it to attract attention for people to come to a barbecue and to have a lot of fun. That were, people wanted to have a barbecue without masks on. A bunch of strangers that didn't know each other. And yet here he was watching members of parliament in the Liberal Party actually joking or actually seriously stating that the reason for invoking the Emergency Act was because of Diagolon. Like, it was the most outrageous, ridiculous thing I had ever seen. And I think this commission should be investigating that as the biggest intelligence joke of, the last decade. It's a joke. Diagolon is a joke. It's not even a real thing.
Thank you. Those are my questions.
Thank you.
To be fair, you have a vice president.
Yes.
Could you tell the commissioner who your vice president is?
The vice president is of Diagolon, which is of my imagination. He is my sidekick that has evolved over the years. He's a demonic goat figurine named Philip with a very, very serious narcotics problem and time traveling ability.
So Jeremy McKenzie, who's in the Saskatchewan prison, is he a victim of actual torture under Canadian law? Absolutely. If he is being treated the way that Morgan, his girlfriend or his wife, is saying he's being treated, which is 2 15-minute intervals out of the cell, that's torture. That's the definition of torture under Canadian law. So apparently she said that he is supposed to, the law dictates in prisons that there must be 2 hours of human contact and there must be 4 hours outside the cell. And like by far, that's not what he's getting if that's what is happening to him. So I used to work in the humanitarian world, and I know people who are connected to some of these big organizations like Amnesty International. So I'm going to reach out to one of their board members who I know and say, hey, Saskatchewan, we need lawyers immediately. If there's torture going on inside the Saskatchewan prison with Jeremy, then this needs to be in the media, and this needs to be red alert, right? Because if we just allow this, if we just accept this, God knows who else they're going to torture. The other tool we have for this is one of the reasons why I left the country is pressure from the international community. Nothing makes a bad prime minister or bad president look worse, like Trudeau, than the international community calling it out. So we can do international press releases, we can do it with British media, we can do it with the Germans, we can get this information to the EU. Someone that I know knows Christine Anderson, she can find out. This is huge. This is really big impact when the international community starts to say, okay, no, we are not going to be having diplomatic or economic relationships with a country that is committing torture, if that's what Canada is doing under the Liberal government. This is how the great story of the end of apartheid end, right? It was the sanctions. It was the financial bankrupting of the white regime, and that's what we can do with Trudeau. We can bankrupt his regime, and he'll just keep photocopying money, which is what he's doing, but it can work. That international hegemonic pressure can work. Okay, so again, this is why I've kept delaying my ICC proprio motu. This is why. This is the evidence. So this is the evidence that we have somebody who is a victim of torture. That is a crime against humanity inside Canadian prisons under the Prime Ministership of Justin Trudeau.
Okay, so my name is Morgan Guptill.
Sorry, what's your last name?
It's Guptill, spelled Guptill.
Guptill?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, so I'm calling on behalf of Jeremy McKenzie, and I'm just trying to get answers. I'm not understanding why he's in segregation, and why he's being denied just like standard rights. Like, from what I understand, what I'm reading online, they're supposed to get 4 hours a day out of their cell, even when they're in the SIU.
Okay, this is not a secure unit. I don't know.
I'm not sure.
What unit is this person supposed to be on that you're calling in regards to?
I was told that Jeremy McKenzie is in Alpha 2.
Okay, can I get a number to call you back?
Yeah, sure. So my net cell is 90.
Okay, and who are you to this Jeremy McKenzie?
I'm his common law partner.
Okay, I will call you back.
Yeah, and
later on.
Yeah, and if you could check into like it just seems that the Genetic Non-Discrimination Act is being breached in this case. He refuses the PCR test because of the ethylene oxide that it has on it, but it is considered a genetic test, and he can't be discriminated against because he won't get that. So, and I can email you any of this information as well if you want to read any material.
Okay, well, I'll call you back later and we'll discuss it. I'm just, like I said, I'm busy at the moment.
Okay, I appreciate it.
Okay, and we're also, due to confidentiality too, there's limited stuff that I can even discuss with you, so...
Yeah, it's just, we'll be...
Call you back.
We really don't want to have to sue the province, but I don't want to see him locked up in SAG all day with these 2 15-minute breaks per day. It's just not, it's torture, according to
we have policies and procedures that we have to follow, so I will call you back.
Okay.
Okay, when I have time, and we will discuss it then.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.
You ever quit? No! We want some more! We want some more! We want some more!